Welcome to another episode of Around the Girdle Earth, the podcast where Dartmouth stories come to life. I'm your host, Yovany Jerez, class of '03, and on each episode, we sit down with members of the Dartmouth alumni community to explore the moments, the mentors, and the memories that shaped them from the green to the great unknown. So, whether you graduated last year or decades ago, these conversations offer a window into the journeys we have taken and the common threads that bring us all together. So grab your favorite drink, step into the story, cue up the nostalgia, and let's wonder together. Today, my very special guest is Paul Gastello, which I actually met earlier this year because we were talking about entrepreneurship. Paul, welcome to the podcast. Why don't you kick us off by letting us know a little bit about your origin story, your superhero story?
All right, origin story. Thanks, Giovanni. Well, I was born in Peru, in Lima, 1990. Came to the United States in 93 when I just turned 3 years old. So maybe like 2 weeks after that. And grew up on Long Island, very, working class immigrant family. Family structure, wonderful, right? Two married parents that just made sure that we had a loving, safe environment to grow up in. They had their problems with the bills and worries and all that kind of stuff, which that never even occurred to me. They didn't let it. And so I had a wonderful time growing up, even despite, let's say, what some would call the deficiencies that I just didn't even, I didn't even know were there. And yeah, I mean, the long and short of my childhood, I guess you could say, I in and out struggles with like belonging because I was this Peruvian kid in the United States. At a certain point, didn't speak the language, was a little bit of an oddball, that didn't quite fit. And then once I got over that and I did fit in a little bit better, I moved to a new neighborhood that was a lot safer, more affluent than I was used to. So I was an oddball there again. And so that's like a whole formative thing as well. But the basic building blocks of my origin story is basically that is like a little bit of struggle, a lot of family and love, a little bit of like learning socially, and a lot of hard work. And that's basically the basics of it until we get to Dartmouth.
Yeah, no, I love your comments because one, I can empathize with what you're saying as a kid who grew up in Cuba, first 12 years of my life, and my parents, had struggles, right? Financial, even sometimes like they didn't know what they were going to feed us because this was on the communist Cuba. But to your point, it's like, yeah, they had adult struggles, but the kids didn't quite feel it, right? They did such a great job at like managing it and shielding us from those adults, stress and worry that I had the privilege of enjoying my childhood, right? And
Right.
And I think that's the right word, right? It's a privilege. It's a privilege to grow up in a house with two parents, let alone that are loving, but also that are protecting you and shielding you from the stresses of the world. I'm curious. You say you also moved around to neighborhoods. Was the concept of education always ingrained in you? Did you always knew you were going to go to college?
It was definitely ingrained in me, for sure. I think, and it's interesting too, because no one in my family had ever gone to college until me. And that was a whole interesting thing because my parents, the whole reason that they came to the United States was to give me and my sister a better shot. Like not even any guarantees, right? Just a chance to make a better life. And they left what comparatively speaking, compared to other Peruvians, was a pretty comfortable life in Peru, to come here and struggle, and the language and the cultural barriers, and you leave behind your parents and your siblings and just everything, right? And but yeah, I definitely remember when I was little, when I got great grades, I got rewarded for it, and when I didn't get great grades, which was anything less than an A or a 90, I could see that my parents were upset. And so it was definitely a marked thing in my childhood and in my memories. And a lot of that, I suppose, is because my parents had a lot of hopes riding on that I would go to college, right? And so for sure, it was a big part of my childhood.
So how did you stumble upon Dartmouth College being an option? And tell us about that process. You're a senior, you're junior in high school, and now you're thinking about college. What are you thinking about, and how did you stumble upon Dartmouth?
So I'm going to tell you some stuff that I don't often talk about, but it's like it's topical to the question, and I suppose it's also a topic within the Latino community. So basically, I want to say this was partway through my sophomore year in high school, and up to that point, I really was not college bound. Like at all. There was a moment, and it was partly related, I suppose, to moving neighborhoods when I was about 11, where I just went into a little bit of a behavioral spiral, and I wasn't getting good grades, and I was acting up, and stuff just like wasn't going well, right? TLDR. And to this day, I still couldn't tell you exactly why, but one day I kind of just started thinking about like all those sacrifices that my parents made, again, just to come here and give me a shot, right? And so there was a big part of me that was like, okay, Paul, you can't blow that. You just can't. That's crazy. And so from one day to the next, I put my batteries on, as we say in Spanish, me puse las pilas. And the behavioral stuff, you know, that's a long story, but the effort at least started right away. I started putting effort back into my schoolwork. I started changing the way that I interacted with my classmates and with the community at large. I started studying for the damn SAT every day, 2 hours after school, after my schoolwork. And so I got serious about the college thing because no one in my family had gone before. I didn't really know like what to do. Like that guidance wasn't there. And so I had to learn a lot of it on my own. And while I was investigating all of that, at some point, you know, I was noticing, oh, okay, as a part of the application process, you've got to be either a citizen or a permanent resident. And I was like, oh, okay, what does that mean? And I asked my dad, I was like, Dad, I got this stuff, right? And he was like, what do you think? I was like, I must. And he was like, no, no, because my parents, when they brought me here to Peru in 1993, they brought me on a tourist visa, which we overstayed. And so at the time I was undocumented. And the unfortunate reality is that at the time, at least, I don't know how it is now, but at the time, the vast majority of undergraduate institutions in the United States had policies against admitting you. And even if they would admit you, had policies against giving you any kind of financial aid, need-based or merit-based. So when all was said and done, looking into it, I eventually discovered that there was about 8 institutions that would both admit me and offer need or merit-based aid. And they were like hyper competitive schools. Harvard, Princeton, Amherst College, Dartmouth. I forget like the full list, but that it gives you an idea, right? So Dartmouth was on the list. And that's the whole reason that I found out about it. And so, yeah, so that's probably not what you were expecting, but that is how I found out about Dartmouth. Is it was on this very limited list of schools.
What a story, and talk about surprises and curveballs, right? Like,
crazy.
You know, it also reminds me, just like, you know, the facts that most people who are undocumented in the U.S. follow the trajectory that your parents follow. They come on a visa, they overstay, and then they stay permanently here. You know, they're not crossing borders; they're just flying right into it. Because I remember meeting a bunch of Irish in Boston. That's exactly what they did, right? But not a lot of people talks about that. They're in the immigration debate, all they talk about is Latin America, specifically Mexico, but they don't talk about the other immigrants from the other parts of the world. I mean, this continues to be the most coveted world to immigrate to, and to give your family a best shot to pursue a stable life and pursue what we call the American dream, right? There's a reason why it's called the American dream, not like the German dream, not like the Japanese dream, not the French dream. No, it's the American dream, you know?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And technically it's, people talk about illegal entry. Technically that's legal entry. And there's benefits to it versus illegal entry that but it gets technical, and I guess we could talk about that. But yeah, I mean, a lot of it is legal entry and overstay, and that's basically the path that got me.
So that allow you to focus and be like, hey, I could only apply to these 8 places. You applied to Dartmouth. Did they accepted you, and you went to visit, and what happened?
Yeah, so I remember applying to 12 schools. I had like 4 safeties, 4 targets, 4 reaches. The 4 reaches were all from that list of 8, right?
You're such an overachiever, man.
And my play with like the safety and target schools was like, I don't know. I hope they give me some kind of scholar, or I can rope some other scholarship from a non-undergraduate institution to go or whatever. But of those 4 reaches, I got into 3 of the 4 that I needed to get into. And yeah, so they accepted me. Amherst College also accepted me. That was another one of the schools on that list. And honestly, I was going to go to Amherst. Like, I was 100% going to go to Amherst. They were very good to my family. They were very good about like showing us around and like showing us what the community was about and assurances and all that kind of stuff. And the reason that I visited Dartmouth was because their accepted students weekend was the same weekend as Amherst's. And once you go up north from where I lived on Long Island, well, it's not that far. We may as well go check it out, right? So we did Amherst, had a wonderful time. I was like, I'm definitely coming here. And then we took the drive up to Hanover to visit Dartmouth. And I remember stepping out onto the green, and I was looking around. I was like, wow, all these people in tie-dyed shirts throwing frisbees around, and I was like, I'm not coming here. There's no way I'm coming. But that changed quickly because one of the, they host you with a more senior undergrad, and Luke was his name, and he and his roommates. Well, we had a lot of fun. They took me out that night. I had a blast. I woke up. I was like, "Wow, that was great!" And so then I was kind of in a pickle because I had 2 schools to choose from, and I eventually went with Dartmouth. And so I guess that's the short story.
That's wonderful. So help us conceptualize your 4 years. How did you optimize your 4 years? What was your major? What were your hobbies, extracurriculum? Any particular professors or memories that stood out for you?
I was a government major. Some standout memories were, one was my freshman floor. I was in Ron or 2 with a just lovely group of people, and we hit it off from the beginning. And that was kind of my new little family in Hanover, which frankly I needed because I was very homesick that first term. And I don't know if I can say much about like particular hobbies that I went with because I wasn't on a sports team. I dabbled with intramural, but I didn't do that a ton either. I kind of just did my schoolwork and made friends and talked to people and hung out and just tried to enjoy the time where I wasn't focused on the schoolwork. But if I had to give my assessment of the 4 years, I had a wonderful time. It was a lot of fun, great experience, great friends. It was, I would say, for me, great from the socializing standpoint, because it was like 8 years of socializing in 4, which I think I kind of needed. And so all in all, I'm grateful for the experience. I can't imagine having gone anywhere else. I had a fantastic 4 years.
Did you study abroad anywhere?
No, I couldn't.
Oh, that's right.
If you leave the country,
that's right.
Can't come back in, and on top of that, you're barred for 10 years.
Wow. Okay, got it. Yeah, you were not the only one in that situation.
No,
but and then let me in terms of your identity as a Latino, did you find yourself gravitating more to the other Latino immigrants or the international crowd?
Neither. I don't think I really gravitated to any one group or another in particular. I just gravitated to people that I got along with, and it didn't matter to me if it was an affiliate group or not.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. So then you spit yourself through Dartmouth, and you had a wonderful time, and then you enter the real world. Give us a summary of that professional journey.
Summary of professional journey. Well, I took a few gap terms during Dartmouth. Basically, what happened is, when did this happen? I think it was like spring of 2012 that President Obama announced the DACA program, right? Which, for anyone who doesn't know, DACA was like, it's basic deferred action for childhood arrivals. It basically gave people in my position the chance to work legally. And up to that point, I'd never taken an internship, not a meaningful anyway, because, well, I couldn't. And that's kind of an important part of the whole thing, right? And so I took an internship. I delayed my last term, my 12th term from Dartmouth, to do this internship with a fund in Boston called Wellington Management, where I was basically a stock market analyst there for a summer. Went great. They gave me a full-time offer. And so when I actually graduated in spring of 2014, after that, I went to work for Wellington. And I worked there for 4 years, picking stocks and helping to pick stocks. And I loved it. Like what I love in work is solving puzzles. And I don't think that I've ever quite had as much fun from a puzzle solving standpoint as when I worked at Wellington. So I did that for 4 years. And then to keep the rest of the career journey short, I left in late 2017. Was it? Yeah, it was late 2017. Trump got elected in his first term. He was like, I'm doing away with all that DACA stuff. And so I freaked out and I was like, oh crap, I've got to go work for some organization to get sponsored on a green card. So I went to Silicon Valley. I worked for a fashion resale marketplace called Poshmark. And the CEO there, Manish Chandra, through Poshmark, sponsored me for the green card. They petitioned to the Labor Department. Got that in 2020. So I'm up for citizenship now, thankfully. But anyway, so I did Poshmark 3 years. I worked for Jack Dorsey's Block within the Cash App unit for a year. I left to go help a little fintech called Current. And I left that in 2023. And since then, I've been doing more. No, 2022, and since then I've been doing more entrepreneurial stuff.
You know, it's worth mentioning that from a legislative perspective, right? The DACA policy is just a way of saying, like, look, your parents made a decision that is affecting you today, and you necessarily were not part of that decision. So why hold you accountable to that, right? So it's creating that space so that people like you, right, talented, ambitious, are still able to contribute to this economy and stay in this economy, and live from here. I think it's a good policy, and I would assume you have similar feelings.
Yeah, and the other thing too is, and part of the reason the courts never fully struck it down is because part of the rationale from the administration is basically like, look, we have immigration enforcement. Immigration enforcement's resources are limited. So it's not like we can go after everyone. So of the people that we're going to go after, if we have limited resources and can't go after everyone, it doesn't make sense to prioritize these young people who didn't decide to come here, who, from what we can tell, are being productive. So let's just like leave them alone for now, let them work. And then that way we can focus our priorities on not that group of people.
Yeah, for sure. Can you imagine what your life would have been had you been deported and go back to a? Well, I mean, you were familiar with Peru, so it wouldn't be like completely. But really, you grew up here.
I'd never been to or seen Peru from the time that I was 3, so I wouldn't have known much.
Yeah. So as far as you know, you're like as American as they come, and like this is your country. Yes, cultural heritage. You got Peruvian, but like, hey, this is where I see my future and moving on. Wow, just to even think about that and just ponder upon that, you know,
it's crazy. And just the stroke of luck that I had in 2012 when that thing was announced. Because I'll be honest with you, I started to kind of give up. I was like, well, I got this 4-year degree now that I'm coming out with, and I don't know what the heck I'm going to do except go pick strawberries or something like that. So yeah, it was a big stroke of luck for sure.
Wow. And now talking about luck, you're making your own luck. you're now starting your own company. You're hit the entrepreneurship world, which is I would imagine the influences come from your San Francisco experiences that you had. Why don't you tell us more about that?
It's for sure the tech world influenced me in that direction. The other thing that influenced me in that direction, though, is just the same thing that I've been thinking about since that moment, my sophomore year of high school, which is like, well, crap, my parents gave up a lot for me to come here. I'm going to make the most of it. and I don't see how I'm honoring my parents and their sacrifices by doing anything less than challenging myself to my limit. And I think entrepreneurship is a good way to do that. Sure, I can be a W-2 employee somewhere and make a good living and not risk much, but I think a lot of why I'm doing this is also to make the most of it. And so that's a lot of the reason that I'm doing it. The company that I'm building, which is called Patchwork, is a platform for small apparel brands to ethically compete with Shein. That's kind of the one-liner. Shein, for those who don't know, is that China-based fashion brand, which has grown to more than 40 billion of sales in just 15 years, which in apparel is unheard of. That is crazy. And the way that they've done that is by building this agile production system that keeps production at the garment factories very close to the signals of what consumers say that they want. And so that way, by keeping that timeline short and fulfilling very quickly, you don't suffer the common problems in apparel, which are, number one, is overstocking, getting too much product, and then you have to mark it down. You have to get rid of it at a steep discount. It's dead stock. You just have to get rid of it without making any money, or you underproduce and you miss the sale, right? So what Patchwork is taking Shein's secret sauce, coming up with a new recipe, and then letting small brands plug into that so that they don't have to build it themselves.
Yeah, I know. I'm familiar with the world, right? My first job out of college was actually in the apparel industry, building uniforms for corporations, Fortune 500 companies, and it really gave me a good glimpse of the process of building something as a shirt or uniform. And you're absolutely right, right? Like there were seasons where we overstock and the inventory was just sitting there, right? Or if you under, then yeah, you missed the sale. That's revenue. So that sounds very interesting.
Either way, it's extremely expensive, And so if you can, go ahead.
What inspired you to pick this specific problem and try to solve it?
In 2022, I started a company called Forager, which was software for row crop farmers. Those are the guys you see on the tractors growing like corn and soybean and wheat out in the Midwest. Okay. It wasn't my idea. I was building it alongside a venture studio. So they give you, the idea, and then they hire you basically to build the company on their behalf. And it just wasn't a good thing for me to do. Like I was like killing myself trying to build this company for someone else, and as a minority equity owner. And so I left that behind, and I went through this like bit of an identity crisis almost, because I'd never given up on anything in my life. And I was like, dude, why are you doing that? Like, what are you doing? And so, but that's a different story. In that kind of like burnout process, I kind of effed off to South America, went on sabbatical, was there for 6 months. And I was in Peru for the first time, by the way, since I was 3 years old. And while I was in Peru, I did the whole thing of like, I'm just going to chill on the beach and go on hikes and natural waterfall, natural pools.
Please tell me you went to Cusco, visit Cusco.
Of course.
Okay.
Beautiful.
That was one of my most memorable hikes, 5 days in the Inca Trail, ending in Cusco. Absolutely amazing hike.
Beautiful place. Amazing. But anyway, while I was down there, I got sick of all that. I was like, this sucks, like living without purpose. And so I started kind of like looking for this next idea. And I thought to myself, well, one of the things that Peru is good at is garment manufacturing. And part of my family, my aunt Toya, this is not really my aunt, but like sometimes Latin American families like adopt a distant relative. And so my Aunt Toya works in the garment business. And so I kind of like explored it a little bit with her help. And so that's how I got into the garment business. And it kind of coincides a little bit too with my experience at Poshmark. So that's how I started like pulling that thread. And in pulling that thread, I started thinking about this Shein thing. I was like, wow, this company is really kicking everyone's butts on technologies that are accessible to other people, and other people aren't following that. I was like, what is going on here, right? And around that time, I met my now co-founder, Frank Chi, who helped a company called Birdie Gray by implementing a version of that kind of agile supply chain. And Birdie Gray went from 20 million gross annual to like more than 100 million in something like 3 or 4 years. And so we decided to team up. We teamed up, and we've been building Patchwork since then.
Yeah, no, that the entrepreneurship journey is not for the faint of heart, right? It's I think life gives you ups and downs, but entrepreneurship gives you peaks and valleys. So
like both in the business and in your own like psychology too.
I'd be curious, obviously, because there's such a different path from what most, I would say, Dartmouth students go into, right? Like, I think we're very much grooming to the investment banking, private equity, sort of, finance realm, and and I've seen people that go into education and maybe nonprofit sector and so on, but you rarely see a lot of people into the entrepreneurship. And in fact, one of the greatest pleasures that I've learned is the Magnuson Center, which it's now incubating that entrepreneurship spirit within Dartmouth. I think they probably took a page from Stanford's book, right? It's like they're doing something cool here that's generating billions of dollars. We could do the same thing. Is that sort of aligns with your observations?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, in my class and in the other kind of adjacent classes, the 12s, the 11s, the 10s, the 14s, the 15s, I think that most people wanted to go into finance or consulting, which, by the way, is the same thing that I did. I went to finance, right? And I think that entrepreneurship center has the right idea, in the sense that I think that these choices, when they're kind of when you see a community making the same choice repetitively, at some point you say, okay, it's kind of a cultural thing here. That idea gets passed on, and then the idea gets passed on again through classes, and there's like, alumni networks that pop up that kind of feed that funnel, and there's practices and tips that feed that funnel. And I think that, yeah, Stanford just has a different culture in that respect, where their undergrads weren't so much doing the finance consulting thing, and we're more going into entrepreneurship. And so I think if Dartmouth now has a center, I'd heard of it. I don't know very much about it, but if we now have a center that's encouraging that for some people, then I think that's great, because I think that the more choices that you put in front of impressionable young minds, the better the odds that they're going to find something that fits them better, or fits them as well as possible.
Yeah, no, for sure. It's called the Magnuson Center. And I've only been involved with them because they've come to San Francisco at least 5 times already, and I've gone to their conferences just for the spirit of networking. And I've always find it very refreshing to see all these Dartmouth alumni with all these ideas. To that point, how have you optimized your Dartmouth alumni network?
I don't know that I have, to be honest with you. Okay. I haven't. Yeah, I wouldn't say that is one of the sharpest tools in my tool belt.
Well, you did reached out to me.
That's how we went around.
Was it?
I
don't remember. Okay.
I think Jorge Pelaez introduced us.
Oh, that's right.
Who's a classmate of mine. Although, to be honest with you, at this point, my memory's a little bit hazy about why. So you might be right. It may be that I reached out to you. I'm not sure.
No. That's right. That's absolutely right. Yeah. So, but still, I mean, I would think that somewhere in there are people doing the purchasing for the textile, the supply chain. I think we need to sharpen that tool up for sure.
Yeah, probably. You're probably right.
So as we come to an end to our dialogue, Paul, I don't know who's going to see this video. It could be a rising senior in high school. It could be an undergrad, or it could be a recent graduate. What are some golden nuggets of wisdom or insights that you would offer them to, just in life in general, to optimize their Dartmouth experience?
Well, one of the things I thought a little bit about when I was kind of reviewing your invitation is the question around like how one defines success and maybe how that changes over time. And so I'll say this just because I think that I had a particular idea of it, which is also very common among Dartmouth undergrads. So and which, maybe given the fact that I went into finance, maybe you'll get someone else to think about it as well. But my answer to that question basically, which is like how I've changed my view of success over time while I was an undergrad, I think it was more a financial definition of success. By the way, this is going to rope into the entrepreneurship thing too, which I think is not a bad one. Like having some resources, especially for example, if you want a family, is pretty key, right? Let's not lie about that. But as I've gotten older, my definition of success has changed a little bit to be not as much financial in its definition as it is about minimizing regret. And that's part of why I got into entrepreneurship too, is because there are a lot of people who maybe aspire to build a particular business, or they have an idea and they just don't go for it because they say it's just very risky. But underlying that thought is that definition of success where it's a financial definition, right? Because I actually see it the other way around, where if you have this idea or you have this dream and you don't go for it, not going for it is the risky thing. Because if you don't go for it, even though it's like calling to you, then you raise the prospect that you get to the end of your life, you realize it's coming to an end, you only got one, and you look back on it and you're like, damn, I could have done so much more than I did, and I just didn't do it because I didn't have the courage, or I was afraid, or whatever it is. I think that's a massive risk. Making money is once you've got some experience under your belt of making some money, I don't think that it's risky to lose on that prospect, because there's infinite ways to make money. There's infinite amounts of money. They print more of that stuff every day, as we know. and so yeah, I would encourage people to at least consider the definition of success, which is about minimizing regret. And that's maybe going to be different for every individual person. But for me, minimizing regret is about staying true to myself, staying true to my aspirations, and staying true to my loved ones. And I think if I do those three things, I'll face a good shot of getting to the end and not being full of regret.
Love those words of wisdom. It made me think, by the way, if you're looking for the greatest challenge, get married, have kids. That's pretty damn challenging, man.
Yeah, no, it's something that I'm looking forward to. It's just, if you're going to have children, one of the key things is finding the right woman.
No, and I'll tell you something.
With other.
And I would say, if your aspirations and ambitions are to conquer the world, by that I mean, start your company and get it to, X amount of millions of dollars. Yeah, you better do that before you get married and have kids. Because, you don't realize this, but your world does begin to pivot around them in a way more significant way. While before you could work 100 hours a week on your business, now priorities shift and pivot absolutely drastically. So
for sure. And they have to.
They absolutely have to. So with that said, Paul, and everybody that joined us online, thank you for joining us in this episode of Around the Girdled Earth. If today's conversation sparked a memory or gave you something to think about, leave us a thoughtful reflection in the comment section. But more importantly, share this episode with a classmate or another fellow alum. It's frankly a very easy way to keep the Dartmouth spirit alive in this chaotic digital age. So until next time, stay curious, stay green, and keep roaming this beautiful fertile earth we call home. Thank you, everybody, and thank you, Paul.
Thanks, Yovany. Take care.